on that side.
Fine.
If a canal passes through a courtyard, we may not draw water from it on Shabbos unless they made a partition 10 tefachim high at the inlet and at the outlet. Rabbi Yehuda says the wall over it is considered a partition. Rabbi Yehuda says it happened that there was a canal in Avel, from which they drew water on Shabbos upon the ruling of the sages. They answered him because it did not have the minimum dimensions. If a balcony is above the water, we may not draw water from it on the Sabbath, unless they made a partition 10 tefachim high, either from above or from below. Similarly, two balconies, one above the other, if they made a partition for the upper one but did not make one for the lower one, they both are prohibited unless they make an eruv.
So this actually, this is an interesting little configuration that they've got there. You've got the diagram in the art scroll.
Right.
Okay. So this is actually, there's a parallel case which we've learned. It was the two courtyards, one inside the other, where if you didn't make an area for the inner one, it puzzles the outer one. But in this case, if you consider that the inner one is the upper one, because the upper one has got the right of passage through the lower one. So what the Mishna is telling us that is that if the upper one made a mechitza, but the lower one didn't, then both of them still are, even the inner one. So it's a stronger case than the case of the two inner courtyards, because in the case of the two courtyards, if the outer one didn't make an eruv, the inner one isn't asad, because the outer one doesn't have rights of passage, so to speak. But in this case, even the upper one can't use it because they didn't make an eruv, right? So kal v'chomer, it would be the case if the lower one made the eruv and the upper one didn't, because he's got right of passage through there. So when the Mishnah only gives the one case, it's a kal v'chomer onto the other case.
Right. Interesting.
Okay, let's carry on with the test.
If a courtyard is less than 4 cubits, we may not pour water into it on Sabbath unless they made a pit, which can hold 2 sa'ah, below the opening, whether on the outside or on the inside, except that on the outside he must cover it, whereas on the inside he need not cover it.
So this is the concern, that if you're pouring out your wastewater, you don't want to be pouring out your wastewater in a way that it's going to be certain to spill out into the Rosh Hashanah, because then you're basically just carrying your wastewater into the Rosh Hashanah. But if you've got a pit in your garden, then that's okay. So if you've got a large garden, a large chatzer, then you don't have to worry about it, because it's not a certainty that the water is going to go out. All right. Mishnah Yod, Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Omer Biv Shu Kamur Arba Amos Birshus Harabim. So if you've got a canal that's covered for 4 amos as it goes into the Rishus Harabim, so that you're allowed to pour water into on Shabbos. He says, because at least you can see that there's a clear break before it comes out into the Rishus Harabim. Chachamim are not having any of that. Afilu gag or chatzer mea ama lo yishpoch al pi habiv. Even if the roof or the courtyard is 100 amas, huge, okay, you're not allowed to pour into this canal, because because immediately you're going to see it's just 4 amas that it's covered, and the water is definitely going to go out into the Rosh Hashanah. Let's just see. There was a comment on this. Shema, okay. And he wanted to go to Atzeh. So some people give the parish that Chachamim made a gezerah that the people who are walking outside shouldn't see water coming out of this and saying, "Oh, look, this guy's dumping his water out in the Rosh Hashanah." But I can see it's coming out of his place. Okay. So the Chachamim say, "Afilu gag l'chatzer mea ama lo yishpoch al pi aviv, aval shofech migag legag." However, he can pour onto his roof, and his roof can spill onto roof, or v'mayim yordin laviv. And ultimately, even if it's known that the water will ultimately come out into the canal, it's separated enough. Once he's pouring onto his roof and the water's traveling a long way, so some of it will spill there, some of it will spill there, and perhaps it's not a certainty. Let's just see if that's why is he allowed to do this? So right, so it's not a direct thing where he's pouring it direct into the canal. he's pouring it onto the roof, and it's a whole a whole chain of events before the water actually finds its way into the canal. Okay. So remember we said that in the previous Mishnah that if you have more than 4 amos, you're allowed to dump your water into your chatzer, right? Because then it's not certain that it's going to spill out into the Rishos Harabim. And it says you can also count a passageway and a chatzer can join together to make up that 4 amos. Okay. Yud Aleph. So if you've got 2 rows of building, two rows of buildings facing each other, okay, which may have multiple floors. Miktasan asuuka, miktasan lo asuuka. So some of them made a pit in their chatzer, and some of them didn't make a pit in their chatzer. Asuuka mutarin. Those who've made a pit on their side of the partition, they're allowed to pour their water out. Unless, of course, they've made an erev chatzeros between them. If they've made an erev chatzeros between them, then the one uka is sufficient for everyone. Okay. Next parak. Kol gagos ha'irishus achas ubilvad shelo yehei gag gavoa 10 unamuch 10 divrei Rabbi Meir. So Rabbi Meir says that all the roofs in the city are considered as a single rishus, as opposed to where the houses are adjoining each other. They've got separate chatzeros, so you can't carry between the chatzeros unless you've made an erev chatzeros. But he says the roofs, as long as the roofs are on the same altitude, you don't have a 10 tachim step between any of the roofs. Then you're okay to consider all of the roofs as a single rishus, and you're allowed to carry across all the roofs. Okay, says Rabbi Meir.
Considering that they're the same height.
As long as they're more or less the same height, within 10 tefachim of each other. Okay. They say just like the chatzeros are single are individual rishuyos, so are the roofs. You'd have to make an erev between them to be able to carry between them. Rabbi Shimon Omer echad gagos, echad chatzeros, echad karpefios, rishus achas lekelim sheshavsu lesochan, lo v'lo lekelim sheshavsu besoch habayis. So Rabbi Shimon goes even further than Rabbi Meir. He says not just the roofs, even the courtyards, even the karpef, that was like the wood store. If it's less than the area of base sasayim, they're all considered a single rishus for the kalim that started out Shabbos in there. So if you wanted to carry things between all these rishus, between the gagos and between the roofs and the courtyards, and even the courtyards is it's an amazing thing to say, because like everything we say about erev chatzeros seems to be about having to join them. So and Rabbi Shimon, I don't remember if Rabbi Shimon has made any comments on erev chatzeros, but it's interesting that his position comes out now that all the chatzeros are intrinsically a single rishus. And the halacha says Kahati is like Rabbi Shimon. There's a brayso brought in the Gemara where Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi says that when we were learning Torah by Rabbi Shimon in Tekoa, we used to take oil and alontis. What's alontis? I'm not sure what alontis is, but it's some chaypetz. Migag legag or migag lechatzer, from the roof to roof, and from roof to chatzer, and from chatzer to chatzer, and from chatzer to karpef, and from karpef to karpef. It's right. Echad. Until basically they took towels. So they took oil and they took towels until they reached the stream, and then they would take it. Then they would wash in the stream, or they would go to mikveh, or whatever it was that they needed to do on Shabbos. And Rabbi Shimon apparently permitted this like so. that they'd be allowed to carry it as long as they're not going into the private property. And that's interesting. Does Article say anything about chatzer, if it's distinct from the chatzeros that we normally need to make an erev chatzeros on, or is Rabbi Shimon coming and uprooting the whole of erev chatzeros?
I'm not sure that I'm not sure.
Can you read in your commentary what it says about Rabbi Shimon's opinion?
Find out one thing. Is this? This says, I just had it right in front of me. Reb Shimon is in accord with Reb Meir on the basic premise that the separation of your domains is in regard to the laws of Erev is predicted on the constant use and is applicable in the main to houses only. Is this what you want?
Yes, carry on. Yeah. Please carry on.
However, he disagrees with Reb Meir on 2 points. A, he rejects Reb Meir's distinction between roofs that are level with each other and those that are not, and permits objects to be transferred from one roof to another regardless of the difference in their heights. And B, he permits the objects to be transferred even from roofs and courtyards and carports, enclosures, and vice versa.
Okay, is anything further on it?
There's a smaller thing that says the carports referred to here must conform with the guidelines established in 2.5 and must therefore be either enclosed for living purposes or have an area less than 5,000 square cubits. Otherwise, the area within the closure has many of the laws of Carmelis, and one may not carry in a distance of 4 amos. Similarly, one may not transfer objects from a courtyard to such a carpus, even if the distance they are carried is less than 4 cubits. Since the carpus is given Carmelis status, this area constitutes transferring from a private domain to a Carmelis and is prohibited even when the strictures of Erev do not apply. That is, even where both belong to one person. Thus, the dispensation outlined here by Reb Shimon can only refer to the type of carpus described earlier, which is classified as a private domain in all respects.
Right. Okay.
That helps you?
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting, but it's still I'm still kind of blown away by the fact that Kahati even says that the halacha follows Rabbi Shimon, because it sounds to me like he's saying that chatzeros are like my chatzer and your chatzer are automatically one area, and have to carry from mine into yours without an area of chatzeros, which is quite a revolutionary thing, considering that we just spent like the whole Masechta talking about how how the residents of the one serve the other one, and they're saying, but hold on, it's like there's a chatzer. Why can't you carry from one into the other if we're following Rabbi Shimon? And why hasn't Rabbi Shimon spoken up before?
These 3 areas, because they are not regularly used as a private area, are all considered one domain according to Reb Shimon.
Oh, because when they're not. Oh, so he's saying when they're not regularly used as a private area, that's an important point. Because if it is used as a private area, then you can't. Then if somebody's exerting, so it must be like sort of an ownerless chatzer.
Yeah. As a result, one may carry from one courtyard to courtyard even without an erev, or from a courtyard to a roof or a carpes. The Mishna, however, grants its permission only to a certain group of utensils, as it proceeds to explain. And then I read that.
Right, it's got to be utensils that were already in those areas before Shabbos came in.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask, but I don't understand what this means. It says roofs, courtyards, carpets are all one domain with respect to utensils which began the Sabbath in them, but not with respect to utensils which began the Sabbath in the house.
Because if you're taking them from the house up to the roof, and now if it started in the house, it was in a private domain. And now you're taking it out onto the roof. That's now like a separate domain. You're transferring between your rishus and the rishus of the roofs, the sort of communal rishus, and that's not permitted unless you've got erev chatzeros. Okay. Let's go. Bab Zayin.
Brothers or partners who eat at their father's table, but who sleep in their own homes, need an erev for each one. Therefore, if one of them forgot to contribute to the erev, he must nullify his rights. When is this so? When they bring the erev to another place. But if the erev was brought to them and there are no other residents in the courtyard, they need not contribute to the Eruv. 5 courtyards which open one into the other and into an alley. If they made an Eruv in the courtyards but did not make a shituf in the alley, they're permitted in the courtyards but prohibited in the alley. If they did make a shituf in the alley, they're permitted here and there. If they made an Eruv for the courtyards and shituf for the alley, but one of the residents of the courtyard forgot to contribute to the Eruv, they are permitted here and there. If one of the residents of the alley did not participate in the shituf, they are permitted in the courtyards, but are prohibited in the alley, for an alley is to the courtyards as a courtyard is to the houses. 2 courtyards, one behind the other. If the inner made an Eruv, but the outer did not, the inner one is permitted while the outer is prohibited. The outer is not the outer, but not the inner. Both are prohibited. Each courtyard makes its own Eruv. Then, each is individually permitted. And Rabbi Akiva prohibits the outer because the rite of passage restricts it. But the Kachamim say the rite of passage is not restricted. Okay. More? Ready?
Yeah, next one. Shabbos Yud Zayin Gimel.
Right. Okay. A can for olives. If there was a knot at its end, it is susceptible to tumor contamination, and if not, it is not susceptible to tumor contamination. In either case, it may be taken on Shabbos. Rabbi Yossi says all utensils may be taken except for a large saw and a coulter. All utensils may be taken either out of necessity or not out of necessity. But Nehemiah says they may not be taken except out of necessity. And all utensils which may be taken on Shabbos, fragments of them may also be taken with them, provided they can still be used to perform some sort of task. For example, fragments of a mixing bowl with which to cover the mouth of a cask, or fragments of a glass with which to cover the mouth of a flask. The Yehuda says, provided they can still perform in the nature of their former tasks, for example, fragments of a mixing bowl into which to pour porridge, or fragments of a glass into which to pour oil. Okay. Okay.
Right. Mashra's final Mishnah.
Mishnah. Okay. What happened to my thing over here? Okay, here it is. Okay. This is hey, right?
Yeah. Hey Ches, yeah.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. About bechay, garlic, ripte, onions, Sicilian beans, and Egyptian lentils. Reb Meir says also colocasia. Reb Yossi says also wild lentils are, except for maestros, and maybe more from anyone in the 7th year. The highest seed pods of the aram, the seeds of the leek, and the seeds of the onion, seeds of turnips and radishes, and other seeds of garden produce which do not serve as food, are exempt from maestros, and may be brought from anyone in the 7th year. And though they were grown from truma stock, they may be eaten.
Adron Alach Maseches Mashros. Maser Sheni.
Okay. Maser Sheni. That goes over here. Maser Sheni. Here we go. Maser Sheni may not be sold or pledged or bartered, but nor may it be used as a weight. And one should not say to his fellow in Yerushalayim, here is wine, give me oil. So also with any other produce. But they may give it to one another as a free gift. Meister of cattle, when unblemished, may not be sold alive, and when blemished, neither alive or slaughtered. Nor may one betroth a woman with it. A firstling, when unblemished, may be sold alive, and when blemished, both alive and slaughtered. And one may betroth a woman with it. Meister Sheni may not be redeemed with an asamon, or with a coin which is not current, or with money that is not at one's disposal.
Okay, that's it.
You remember those coins? Remember those coins you used to have in the telephone?
Yeah, the asimonim.
Yeah.
Yes.
Long time ago. All right. If a woman expels a red-colored object resembling a rind, a hair, dirt, or midges, let her put it in water. If it dissolves, she is tameh. If not, she is tahor. If a woman aborts something resembling fish, locusts, abominable creatures, or crawling creatures, if there is blood with them, she's tameh. If not, they're tahor. If a woman aborts something resembling a type of domesticated animal, wild animal, or fowl, whether it is a non-kosher or kosher species, if it is a male, she observed the period of Tuma and Tara for a male. If it is a female, she observed the period of Tuma and Tara for a female. And if the gender is not known, she observed the period of Tuma and Tara for a male and a female.
In other
These
words,
are the words of Reb Meir.
right. In other words, the chumras of both. So the dam
Right.
tuma is 14 days like for a girl, and the dam tara is only up to 40 days like for a boy.
But the sages say anything that does not have something of a human form is not deemed a child. If a woman aborts an embryo full of water, full of blood, or full of multicolored matter, she does not need to be concerned that it is a child. But the embryo was developed, she must observe the periods of Tuma and Tara of a male and female. If a woman aborts a sandal or an afterbirth, she must observe the periods of Tuma and Tara for a male and a female. If there is an afterbirth in the house is Tameh. Not that the afterbirth itself is a child, rather it is presumed that there is no afterbirth without a child. And Rav Shimon says the child disintegrated before it emerged. Okay.
Close my door.
Okay.
Okay, Bechoros Aleph Hey.
Okay, Sota.
Bechoros.
Oh, of course, it's first, right. Okay. Aleph Hey. One may not redeem a firstborn donkey with a calf or an undomesticated beast, a slaughtering animal, a treifa, a hybrid, or a koi. Elazar permits redemption with a hybrid because it is a sah, but he permits redemption with a koi because it is doubtful. If he gave it to a kohen, the kohen may not keep it until he sets aside, excuse me, a lamb or a kid in its stead. If one, sorry, if one sets aside a lamb for redemption of a firstborn donkey or it dies, Eliezer says one is responsible for it, as with the 5 Salem of the sun. The comment, however, say one is not responsible for it, as with the redemption of Ma'aseh Sheni. Reb Yeshua and Reb Tzadok testify concerning the redemption of a firstborn donkey that died, and there is nothing here for a kohen. If the firstborn donkey dies, Reb Eliezer says it must be buried, and benefit may be derived from the lamb. The comment, however, say it need not be buried, and the lamb belongs to a kohen. If he does not wish to redeem it, he must decapitate it with a large knife from behind and bury it. The precept of redemption takes precedence over the precept of decapitation, as it states, and if you do not redeem it, you shall decapitate it. The precept of Yehud if Yehud takes precedence over the precept of redemption, as it states, who did not designate her, he shall cause her to be redeemed. The precept of Yibum takes precedence over the precept of Chalitza in the early days when they would intend to perform Yibum for the sake of fulfilling the precept. But now they do not intend to perform Yibum for the sake of fulfilling the precept. They said the precept of Chalitza takes precedence over the precepts of Yibum. The precept of redemption is on the owner. He makes precedence over any other person, as it is said, if it is not redeemed, it shall be sold for its value.
Okay.
Why does it state that it has to be decapitated from the back?
That's the mitzvah of Arifa for the donkey. Is that just like Arifa is with the Egla Arufa is also it's killed with a chop to the back of the neck. It shouldn't it shouldn't look like a shchita.
Okay. Sota, we have Chet Zion. When is the case? When is this case? The case it is discretionary war, but with a war commanded.
So in other words, when do you have all these exemptions from the army?
Right. All must go forth, even a groom from his chamber and a bride from her bridal chamber. Rabbi Yehuda said, when is this the case? In a war commanded by Torah, but in a war of duty, all go forth, even the groom from his chamber and the bride from her bridal chamber.
And it turns out that they're actually not disagreeing. They just have it's just about the semantics of what's called the mechemes mitzvah and what's called the mechemes chova.
Right.
But they're actually, in terms of practical halacha, they're actually in agreement on the things. It's just the terminology that they're disagreeing with.
The passage regarding the decapitated calf must be recited in the holy tongue, as it is said, if a corpse should be found in the land, your elders and your judges shall go out. 3 members of the high court in Yerushalayim would go out. Rabbi Yehuda says 5, as it is said, your elders, 2 and your judges, another 2, and since the court cannot be even, they must add 1 more. If it was found buried in a heap or hanging from a tree or floating upon the water, they would not decapitate a calf, as it is said, in the land, implying that it was not buried in a heap, fallen but not hanging from a tree in the field, but not floating upon the water. If it was found near the border or near a city of which the majority of non-Jews, or a city in which there is no court of law, they would not decapitate a calf. They do not measure except from a city from which there is a court of law. If it was found equidistant from two cities, the two bring calves, two calves. These are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. And Jerusalem is exempt from the writ of the decapitated calf. If the head was found,
we're done.
That's it. Okay.
That's it.
Okay. Have a great day.
A wonderful day.
Beautiful outside. Beautiful weather.
Yeah.
Okay.
I love this time of year.
I know. All right. Be well. See you tomorrow,
Okay.
Mr. Shem. Thank you.
Kol tov.